A very warm welcome everyone to Lit Studio. I'm Karishma. As you've already known, I've qualified UGC NET JRF, and before that I've qualified UGC NET thrice, and I've qualified AP SET and GATE in English as well. I've also been a gold medalist in both my bachelor's and master's. So currently we are discussing literary theory, in which we are discussing new criticism. I've also dealt with some of the major proponents of new criticism like I. Richards, William Emerson, Clint Brooks earlier. This video is particularly about F.R. Lewis. F.R. Lewis is a very peculiar kind of guy because even though he accepts the theory of new criticism, certain views of his are kind of very different from the school of new criticism. But even then, the new criticism as an umbrella term has gotten every term of his under their you know school of thought. They adapted his theories. All right, now let's get right into the video. F.R. Lewis, let's know what he talks about, what he's all about. All right, so that when actually he has given a very important concept, but very few people would include him into new criticism because of all of his theories. As we dwell into the later part of this video, you understand why I'm saying this. But he is also a very crucial part of new criticism, and his theory has been asked multiple times in UGC NET as well. In fact, when I was giving my paper, I've observed questions on his theory. All right, there have been multiple instances where the questions from his theory are given. So don't take this lightly. Please listen to the entire class attentively. All right. Okay. So F.R. Lewis, although he agreed with the idea of new critics, he is a bit different, as I've mentioned. He says a poem is not self-contained. So if you listened to the class of new criticism, new critics argue that poem is an organic whole. All right. A poem is enough to analyze itself. All right. But F.R. Lewis argues that a poem is not self-contained. That is, it's not self-sufficient, so it cannot be judged in isolation. So what he says in brief is, a poem cannot be judged in isolation. How can you say a poem is great or not if you have nothing to compare it to? For example, take any poem, all right? For example, take the poem of let's say take the poem of Daffodils by Wordsworth. For example, where if we don't know what nature poetry would be, what great romantic poetry would be, for example, if you haven't studied John Keats, if you haven't studied Coleridge, if you haven't studied any other works of Wordsworth, you wouldn't know whether Daffodils is a good poem or not, whether it is a good nature poem or not, right? You should study Keats, Coleridge, other works of Wordsworth. All right, to understand, to place Daffodils in the category of greatness or not. All right, so he argues just that it's not enough to judge a poetry in isolation. You cannot take a good poem and you cannot take a poem and say it's good, because you should compare it to something. You should have some set of standards in mind. All right, so what are those standards that are set? Okay, so that is what his theory would be all about. He, like T.S. Eliot says in his essay Tradition and Individual Talent, if you have known, T.S. Eliot has written an essay called Tradition and Individual Talent, wherein he says, it is by following tradition a work becomes great. So, to become great, one must follow tradition, all right? To become a great dramatist, one must follow great dramatists, okay? Like Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, all of those great dramatists. I mean, I'm not asking you to copy Shakespeare or Marlowe, but you know, who are the great dramatists of your time, whom we have studied? What are those qualities that actually made them great? We should study those qualities and try to utilize them, not replicate them or not actually copy them from them, but you should able to learn from them and learn their techniques and try to inculcate those techniques and features into your own works. All right. So in Tradition and Individual Talent, he argues that it is only by following tradition set forth before you, a work becomes great. F.R. Lewis has same view. All right. When he says we cannot separate a work from the society, culture, and the tradition which created it. See, a work is created in a combination of the society plus culture plus tradition. All right. For example, if I ever write a book, I'd keep in mind it would be a product of, as I am an Indian, it would be a product of Indian society and the culture I am brought up in. All right. Culture specific to me, because culture would be very different from region to region, religion to religion. I mean, culture is very both culture is both general and also particular, if you understand what I mean. All right. And also the tradition that has been followed. If I follow Shakespeare, my work would be in certain way. If I follow Jane Austen, my work would be in certain way. All right. So the society plus culture plus the tradition which I follow would be making my work. All right. So he says that we cannot separate a work. My work cannot be separated from the society, culture, and tradition, which actually played a pivotal role in creating that set of work, right? So that's what F.R. Lewis says. So, and then his important book would be Great Tradition, and also he wrote another book called Wasteland. All right, Great Tradition is his concept as well. It is very important. You must associate F.R. Lewis to Great Tradition. In fact, UGC NET exam, they would ask question like, which of the following theorists has put forth the theory of Great Tradition, or which among the following concepts has been put forth by F.R. Lewis. All right, you must always be attentive when you are answering the question paper, because every one of you will go to the exam by studying every one of those materials that everyone studied, right? So you must be able to remember them to the maximum point. Only then you can understand it. Even if after preparation, after months of preparation, if you cannot place that exact answer, if you want to guess the answer, I don't think that preparation would be sufficient for you to crack this examination. You should be very straightforward and very sure of your answer. All right. And there is this second book. It's actually an essay, critical essay that he has written. If you are wondering why The Wasteland is written here, it is written by T.S. Eliot. Exactly, yes, T.S. Eliot has written the poem Wasteland. All right. Wasteland. The poem was written by T.S. Eliot. All right. Now, what does F.R. Lewis did was he wrote this critical essay for the readers to understand how to read the poem The Wasteland, because many people actually do not understand the depth of Wasteland, so they would not be reading it in a way that gives it maximum effect. The artistic value would be maximum consumed. All right. So here F.R. Lewis in this critical essay would give how to read the poem The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. All right. So there's two books. One is a critical essay. The first book is a Great Tradition, and the second book is The Wasteland. All right. The second Wasteland is actually a critical essay written by F.R. Lewis. All right. Now let's jump right on to the concepts given by F.R. Lewis. All right. So the concept is actually Great Tradition. He says that there are four main English novelists. They are Jane Austen, Henry James, George Eliot, Joseph Conrad. All right. So he says these are the only four people whose we should follow the tradition that was put forth by these four people. Later on, he also by the end of the book, he also adds D.H. Lawrence to his list of great writers. But before that, he gives the name of these four people. All right. They might also ask you a question about who are the writers included in F.R. Lewis's Great Tradition. Okay, you must be able to remember who are the authors great authors considered great by F.R. Lewis and what is great tradition. Alright, so these are great authors. Alright, so what is great tradition? The tradition set forth by great authors is great tradition. Alright, so let me be very clear about it. He begins by telling what is meant by great English novelist. Okay, these people and the techniques with which they wrote the novels, they approached their works is called great tradition. Okay, and proceeds to talk about what he meant by great tradition. A writer, when he is following the tradition, style or pattern set by the great writers, the writer is following the great tradition. For example, if I ever to be a writer and if I follow the tradition of the great writers, for example, if I follow the tradition of George Eliot or James Joyce or Henry James, if I follow the tradition of Jane Austen, George Eliot, Henry James and Joseph Conrad, I would become a great writer myself. Alright, he argues that. He also goes on to say he considered George Eliot to be a great writer because she appreciated the work of Jane Austen, and he did not consider Bronte or Anthony Trollope to be great authors because they never really appreciated Jane Austen. Alright, see, that's where I wrote. F.R. Lewis believed that Jane Austen is the center of English tradition. He believed that Jane Austen is the center of English tradition. And if anyone follows her or imitates her style of writing, then the person can also be included in the great tradition, as in the case of George Eliot. As Lewis says that Eliot would always be indebted to Austen. Alright, he also says that he excluded Charlotte Bronte and Anthony Trollope from the list of great English novelists because they never appreciated Jane Austen. Alright, he considered them, but because they never really appreciated Jane Austen, he did not add them to the list. Alright, he says we should have certain standards in mind before approaching a work. That's what we talked about earlier. Remember, when I told you about daffodils, I should actually have certain standards of good poetry, or if I am considering it based on the fact that it is a good nature poetry, I should have set beliefs or set standards in my mind on what a good nature poetry is and who are the good poets who wrote good nature poetry, right? Only then I would be able to come to a judgment whether it would be a great poem or not, right? If it's a great piece of writing or not. So he says that same thing. We should have certain standards in mind before we approach a work. If it matches the standard levels, only then the text can be considered great. And now if you argue saying that, ma'am, you have told me that the text should be independent in itself, a text should never be compared with other texts or something like that. Here we are not doing any injustice because we are not doing it any injustice because we are not looking at the text in our hand subjectively. We are not approaching it with partiality. All right, because when we have certain standards in our mind, only then we will be able to judge a good book whether it's a good book or not. For example, if I am reading a piece of poem by some ex-author, and I should read it objectively, right? That's what new criticism says. Here, if I have certain work in my mind and I'm comparing it to some other work, okay, even then when I look into the text, having certain, okay, what is good, what is bad, having certain standards, it just makes it easier for me to understand the depth of the poem. All right, so we should know what is the, for example, if I have to study the form of the poetry, meter of the poetry, or the kind of context in which the poetry has been written, only then I will be able to understand whether it would be a great poem or not. Otherwise, I would not be understanding it. So, here we are not looking at there is no subjective approach towards the poetry, all right? Approach is not present, and it is also not being partiality towards any text is also not present, all right? So, now we are not doing any kind of injustice to the poem in our hand. So, it's all right to, have certain standards. So, it's all right to know who are the great writers and whether this work is being followed according to the great tradition or not. But it's not really good to, look into the text in a subjective manner, look into certain text with partiality, or even with a positive kind of partiality, or even with a negative kind of partiality. No matter however your view is, it should always be objective. All right, that's what Lewis says. He follows Arnold's touchstone method. See, for example, what is great tradition? He says that there are certain great authors and we should follow or imitate those, try to imitate those authors, try to imitate the styles and techniques of those authors. Then the text would become great itself. All right. And if you remember Arnold's touchstone method, he says that great authors, classical authors like Homer, or Shakespeare, or anybody, for even anybody to become great, one should, take pieces of lines or dialogues from those writers and try to inculcate the style of the language, those dialogues which were prominent in our, books. Only then they become great. So touchstone method talks about the classical authors and trying to imitate those authors. All right, so it's kind of very similar to great tradition. So he follows, F.R. Lewis follows Arnold's touchstone method. Okay, we can conclude that. And even in great tradition, he says that the text should teach a moral purpose for it to be included in great tradition. Just because a text is present with no moral purpose, I don't think any text is following a great tradition, right? So it should always have a higher moral purpose for the text for it to be included in in great tradition. And he goes on to say, moral formalism. Lewis's approach to literature was deeply rooted in moral formalism, a critical stance that emphasizes the moral implications and thematic substance over mere aesthetic concerns. If you find it difficult to understand what he means, is he critiqued works prioritized artistic form over content, arguing that the best literature deals with human experience. Okay, now it should be clear. For example, he says that a text should give importance to artistic value over its content. All right, artistic value should be greater than the content. That's what it simply means. Okay, arguing that the best literature deals with human experience and possesses a marked moral intensity. This viewpoint aligns with new criticism's focus on intrinsic qualities of a text, including its themes, structure, and language, rather than external factors like the author's intention or historical text. Okay, so rather than following the author's intentions or historical text, one should always follow or focus on the intrinsic qualities of the text, including its themes, structure, and language. For example, if there are certain themes, one should always follow the themes put forth by the writers of great tradition. Okay, one should always follow the structure put forth by the writers of great tradition, and language, and so on and so forth. That's what F.R. Lewis argues in his great tradition. All right. So I hope you understood everything that it's been discussed as of now. And F.R. Lewis is also famous for his journal called Scrutiny. All right, Scrutiny, which he wrote along with his wife Curie Roth. All right. So in the journal Scrutiny, he used it as a vehicle to discuss the new Cambridge criticism. Okay, Cambridge is the school actually. So wherein the new criticism is discussed. Here, through the journal, they talked about the characteristics of new criticism. All right. Through this journal, they also attacked Bloomsbury Group, established by Virginia Woolf and her husband. Bloomsbury Group would be discussed when we talk about literary movements and schools. But if you know Virginia Woolf, we all know that she has, a journal called Bloomsbury. She, along with her husband and along with certain important writers like James Joyce and certain other writers, they formed into a group of writers called Bloomsbury Group, and they used to publish articles together, publish books together. All right. And F.R. Lewis is very against the Bloomsbury Group, so he used this journal scrutiny to attack the Bloomsbury Group as well. So I think we've discussed everything that is there about FR Lewis that is important for this UGC NET examination. I think your preparation towards the examination is going very well, and I really hope that you can answer every question that's been discussed in these classes that will come into the examination as well. And I also highly suggest you to take up some mock examinations while you are at here, so that it would also increase your chances of high score in your examinations. All right, I think we can wrap up here, and I'll also zoom out this slide so that you can kind of take a screenshot if it's necessary. All right, you can take a screenshot and take a zoom in version of the screenshot. All right, thank you then.